Welcome. This video is about Afghanistan.
وطن عشقته افتخارم وطن درها جان سارم
وطن عشق تو افتخارم وطن در رهت جان سارم
وطن خاک پاکت بهشتم وطن گل خنک لاله زارم
وطن خاک پاکت بهشتم وطن گل خند لاله زارم
وطن عشق تو افتخارم وطن در رهت جان سارم.
Alright, I thought we'd start at 1747 when Ahmed Shah Durrani took control of the area and with his 25-year reign started the Durrani dynasty. By the 1820s, this dynasty was coming to an end when it was overthrown and there was a new leader by 1826, Dost Muhammad Khan. Okay, to make sense of this next part, we need to talk about something that's been known as the Great Game. Now, you have the Russian Empire expanding above Afghanistan, and below you have the British Empire in the form of British India. And so now that Dost Muhammad Khan is in power, the British don't want them associating with Russia, so that brings us to the First Anglo-Afghan War. Okay, so in 1838, Governor-General of India, Lord Auckland, declared war on Afghanistan. The British wanted someone more pro-Britain in power, so they got Shoga Khan from the previous dynasty. But in 1842, when 4,500 soldiers accompanied by 12,000 camp followers were moving from Kabul to Jalalabad, they were massacred by an army led by Akbar Khan, the son of Dost Muhammad Khan, causing the British to withdraw, and Dost Muhammad Khan was released and regained the throne, where he stayed until 1863. And then when we get to 1878, that brings us to the Second Anglo-Afghan War, which kicked off because Admir Sher Ali had a meeting with some Russians, and then when the British requested a meeting and were declined, they sent in 40,000 soldiers. In this time, Sher Ali dies, and to replace him as Admir is Yaqub Khan, who signs the Treaty of Gandamark, pretty much handing all foreign relations to the British to deal with. People weren't happy. Yaqub Khan abdicated, and so the British looked for someone to keep loyalty to them and not associate with Russia, and they found that in Abdul Rahman Khan, who became known as the Iron Admir, with the Second War ending in 1880. Afghanistan remains neutral through the First World War, but then in February of 1919, their leader Habibullah Khan was assassinated, and when his son Amullah Khan takes power, that's when you get that Third Anglo-Afghan War, which ended in August of 1919 with the signing of the Rawalpindi Treaty, and Afghanistan gained control over their foreign affairs again and was recognized as an independent nation. Now, what is the Durand Line? The border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Okay, while Amanullah was king of Afghanistan, he weakened the power of the Loya Jirga, which is the National Council, and he also created the national currency of Afghanis to replace the Afghan rupee. They opened many schools and encouraged everyone to get education, with boys and girls, and he had a fascination for Western fashion. It seems like the design of Afghanistan's flag is changed whenever someone new is in power. Have you ever wondered what the symbol is on the Afghan flag? That in the middle there is a mosque, and now the flag design from 1933 remained the flag for as long as Muhammad Zahir Shah was the last king of Afghanistan. He kept Afghanistan neutral during the Second World War, and in in 1953 he made his cousin Muhammad Dawood Khan his prime minister. Now in 1965, Nur Muhammad Taraki and Babrak Kemal creates the Communist Party, and in 1973 Muhammad Dawood Khan overthrows his cousin Muhammad Zahir Shah, which then Muhammad Dawood Khan names himself president and prime minister. In 1978 he is overthrown by, remember these guys, the Communist Party. So now Nur Muhammad Taraki is president, Hafizullah Amin is prime minister, and Babrak Kemal is deputy prime minister. And around this time is when the Mujahideen is created. And now going into 1979, this is a messy year. The president is killed, the prime minister is killed, the USSR invades Afghanistan, and so the deputy prime minister becomes prime minister. The Mujahideen called for jihad to get rid of the Soviets. And so by 1984 you have people like Osama bin Laden going to Afghanistan to join the fight. A couple years later they end up with a new president, Muhammad Najibullah, and this is around when other countries started supplying the Mujahideen with weapons. Now I've got some clips I'd like to show you. A few different clips from the mid-80s that definitely highlights what I'm talking about.
Soviet Union felt like they were very much more powerful in the 70s because of our failure in Vietnam and the conversion of many countries to communism, and they felt like they were on the march, they were on the move.
This is the third occasion since World War II that the Soviet Union has moved militarily to assert control over one of its neighbors.
Well, the Americans were not quite sure what to do with regard to Afghanistan. There was concern that the country is so impossible to manage and govern, even by the Afghanis, and nobody else has ever really won the war there.
The anti-government rebels call themselves the Mujahideen.
Do you think that the Mujahideen alone can get the Soviet army out of Afghanistan and topple the government?
Really, it is a difficult job. Really, it's not easy. Afghanistan people, they are very poor and they have not enough arms against these modern weapons of Russia. But the people in other countries, they could support the Mujahideen, provide them arms, weapons, money, food, clothes, medicine, anything.
They're going to need millions of dollars worth of arms to fight the Soviet army. The U.S. goes public with its fight against the communist Afghan government.
They figured, you know, we're not going to go in there and let it become a graveyard for our people. The Soviets are in there, they've already made the commitment, so let's just funnel aid to the Northern Alliance and then to the broader group called the Mujahideen, and just make the Soviets pay the price for kind of going into the wrong place at the wrong time.
Inside the bright tented enclosure, 1,500 men waited. We were told that many of these men were Mujahideen who traveled from the border specially for this meeting. A mullah chanted some verses from the Quran concerning exiles. Mrs. Thatcher promised them an extra £2 million worth of aid, and she made clear the West's support for the Afghan resistance fighters.
I want to say that the hearts of the free world are with you, and with those of your countrymen who have stayed...
And that gained her ringing shouts of support.
We've just held a very useful, I might say brief, but also I will add a very moving discussion with Chairman Yunus Khalis of the Islamic Union of Mujahideen of Afghanistan and other members of his distinguished delegation. I expressed our nation's continued strong support for the resistance and our satisfaction with the large step the Afghan resistance took toward unity in choosing a chairman for the first time. This new political milestone demonstrates that the people of Afghanistan speak with one voice in their opposition to the Soviet invasion and occupation of their homeland. This increasing unity has already made itself felt on the battlefield. During the past 18 months, the Mujahideen fighting inside the country have improved their weapons, tactics, and coordination. The result has been a string of serious defeats for the Soviet elite units, as well as many divisions from the Kabul army. Chairman Kallis and his delegation are visiting Washington following the November 10th UN General Assembly vote, which, with a record vote once again, called overwhelmingly for the withdrawal of all foreign troops from Afghanistan.
One weapon could do the job, a handheld heat-seeking missile called the Stinger. In the mid-1980s, the U.S. began covertly supplying Stingers to the Mujahideen.
For a period of about 100 days after the introduction of the Stinger, the Soviets were losing one aircraft per day. One aircraft per day. This drove this into the high-cost arena in a hurry. And as a matter of fact, the impact of these kinds of losses was significant from a number of ways. Not only the hardware losses, but the fact that morale started to go down. Transport pilots wouldn't fly. For a period just prior to the removal, extrication of Soviet forces, Stinger gave Mujahideen a decided edge.
The Soviets were vulnerable to the Stinger, but the Mujahideen had little to fear from Soviet smart weapons. After all, they had no tanks or aircraft for smart weapons to hit.
Smart weapons are supplied by all the industrial nations in the world. For example, United States, Soviet Union, France, certainly, Italy, Israel, Brazil, South Africa, England, the list goes on and on. All of these countries are involved in it because it's very commercially attractive to them.
1986, you have countries like the US and the UK getting weapons to the Mujahideen via Pakistan. And in 1988, that's when Al-Qaeda is created. 1989, the US, Pakistan, Afghanistan and the Soviet Union sign a peace agreement at Geneva and the Soviets start to withdraw. But they're still getting weapons to the Soviet Afghan army until the Soviet Union comes to an end in 1991. Now in 1992, when there's negotiations on how the country should move forward in Kabul between the Mujahideen warlord and the government, a member of the Mujahideen, Ahmad Shah Massoud, suggests an Islamic coalition government, which many agree with except for Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. So fighting continues between Massoud's Northern Alliance, the Mujahideen, and people fighting for Gulbuddin, which are backed by Pakistan, until 1994 when the Taliban is created and then Pakistan swaps over to backing them. And then with the Taliban seizing control of most of Afghanistan by 1996, and in 1997 gruesomely publicly killing the president Mohammad Najibullah. Fighting continues between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance. In 1998, Al-Qaeda bombs 2 US embassies in African countries. So President Clinton ordered cruise missile attacks on Al-Qaeda training camps in Afghanistan. Alright, now let's talk about 2001. We might as well jump straight to September, and I want to talk about September 9th because that is when Ahmad Shah Massoud, the leader of the Northern Alliance, the Mujahideen, was assassinated by 2 people posing as journalists. Now, I'm still unclear on whether they were Al-Qaeda or Taliban members, but either way, I'm pretty sure I don't need to tell many people about what happened 2 days later on the 11th of September 2001. Now I'm going to show you some footage. On the left, on the blue TV, it will be how people in Afghanistan reacted to the death of Massoud, and then on the right TV, on the green one, we'll have a look at America dealing with 9/11.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations and to attack the military capability of the Taliban regime. So the United States and their allies like Britain and Australia have gone into Afghanistan, and now I'm going to skip to 2009 and show you something from congressional hearings. And since you've been watching this video, everything Hillary Clinton says is no surprise to you, but I thought I would include it because it's important to hear them recognize it.
Remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago. And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union, They invaded Afghanistan, and we did not want to see them control Central Asia, and we went to work. And it was President Reagan, in partnership with the Congress, led by Democrats, who said, you know what, sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's deal with the ISI and the Pakistani military, and let's go recruit these mujahideen, and let's get some to come from Saudi Arabia and other places, importing their Wahhabi brand of Islam so that we can go beat the Soviet Union. And guess what? They retreated. They lost billions of dollars, and it led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there's a very strong argument, which is, it wasn't a bad investment to end the Soviet Union, but let's be careful what we sow, because we will harvest.
And then 2 years later, so 10 years into being in Afghanistan, they find and kill Osama bin Laden.
I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda.
And so, mission accomplished, right? Gonna get out, right? Why didn't they leave then?
Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war.
See, now those were just 2 videos from 2011, and now I'm going to show you some footage from 2012.
The helmet camera footage you're seeing is from the SAS patrol dog handler, and what you will see next could result in charges of war crimes. The dog, named Quake, is then let off the leash.
Quake, come! Lieutenant Bodega! Quake, down!
The dog handler's gun is trained on a figure in the distance who drops down into the field. At the field, the dog handler and Soldier C come across a young man amongst the wheat who's trying to fight off Quake.
Quake! Leave! Quake!
In the man's hand appears to be a set of red prayer beads. No weapon or radio can be seen. The Afghan is compliant and quiet on the ground.
Down.
As the dog is called off, Soldier C trains his weapon on the Afghan from very close range. He then turns to the dog handler.
Quake, no! Quake, stop! Leave! Quake! Leave!
Heal. 3 shots from close range. The Afghan is dead, and Soldier C walks off.
No! Heal!
The whole thing, from landing to killing, takes less than 3 minutes.
Heal! Heal!
Alright, and when we come to 2015, this is when we saw headlines like US troops ordered to ignore child sex slavery in Afghanistan. And here are just 3 examples of headlines from 2015. But I'd like to also point out this from Australian ABC from 2010. And where it has listed under background reading, it's got stories that go back to 2007. Now I just wanted to mention that, and I wanted to show you a news clip.
They're called dancing boys, T-boys, or, by many who have had to turn a blind eye to them, Afghan sex slaves. A subculture of bachabazi, or boy play, is widely known in Afghanistan, but for U.S. service members there, the abuse of these children is infuriatingly hard to stop, especially when the abuse comes from American-backed Afghan commanders there.
I had a boy because every commander had one.
In a 2010 PBS documentary, a former Afghan commander of the Northern Alliance spoke openly, shamelessly, about this sick practice.
If I didn't have a boy, I couldn't compete with the others.
Today, the New York Times reports that the American military stands accused of ordering troops to purposely turn a blind eye to the abuse in order to maintain good relations with Afghan forces.
The reason that we weren't able to step in with these local rape cases was we didn't want to undermine the authority of the local government. We were trying to build up the local government. Us acting after the local government fails to can certainly undermine their credibility.
Retired U.S. Army Captain Dan Quinn tells CNN that he and Sergeant First Class Charles Martland were punished for confronting an admitted Afghan child rapist, a police commander.
Alright, and then we get to 2020, when Donald Trump was still president. Now I've got some documents I'd like to show you. First one, joint declaration between the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the United States of America for bringing peace to Afghanistan. It's only a 3-page document, and I want to show you something on page 3. The Islamic Republic of Afghanistan will participate in U.S. facilitated discussions with Taliban representatives on confidence-building measures to include determining the feasibility of releasing significant numbers of prisoners on both sides. Now, here's another document I would like to show you, and this says Agreement for bringing peace to Afghanistan between the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is not recognized by the United States as a state and is known as the Taliban, and the United States of America, February 29th, 2020. This is a 4-page document, and here I just want to read you this word salad. The United States is committed to start immediately to work with all relevant sides on a plan to expeditiously release combat and political prisoners as a confidence-building measure with the coordination and approval of all relevant sides. Up to 5,000 prisoners of the Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan, which is not recognized by the United States as a state and is known as the Taliban, and up to 1,000 prisoners of the other side will be released by March 10th, 2020. Now, what does that mean? What does this sentence mean? Now, who has to hand over 1,000 people and who has to hand over 5,000 people? Well, we'll find out, because if we go back to the other document and how it said UN Security Council to remove members of the Taliban from the sanctions list with the aim of achieving this objective by May 29th, 2020. Now, I have that UN Security Council document. And now I must read this to you. Differences in interpretation of the agreement will be difficult to resolve. Afghan government interlocutors informed the monitoring team that the provision of the release of up to 5,000 Taliban prisoners came as a surprise, and that the sudden release of so many prisoners would be a complicated exercise. Many officials were especially reluctant to free Taliban prisoners who had participated in high-profile attack, fearing they would simply return to the battlefield as soon as they were released. Since the end of February, an increase in abductions of government officials and civilians have been noted, suggesting that the Taliban did not actually hold 1,000 Afghan forces prisoners, but were seeking to boost prisoner numbers for the exchange. So there you have it. They handed over 5,000 members of the Taliban in exchange for 1,000 prisoners, which the Taliban didn't even have. They had to make up the numbers last minute. That's Trump's peace deal for you. And so this brings us to 2021, and the USA and its allies withdraw from Afghanistan. Joe Biden finally does it, and if you've been anywhere near any screen, you probably have seen some of the chaos that has happened while the troops were leaving. Okay, that last bit of footage was of a anti-Taliban protest, and people were shot and killed while waving the flag of Afghanistan. So I tried to paint the flag as a sign of solidarity with people of Afghanistan and the people that had to flee at any point in time. And now I've read that the red in the middle of the flag symbolizes the blood shed by the people that had to fight for the independence of the country. And now this brings me to a critique of some commentary I've heard by some people I look up to that went kind of along the lines of, oh, they don't want to fight for their country, in regards to when the Afghan army dissolved pretty much as soon as the US withdrew. Now I have a few points to make in response to that sort of mentality. As I just shown this timeline of key events, people of Afghanistan have been fighting for their land for hundreds of years, so I'm hoping that when members of my audience hear war in Afghanistan, they think, what do you mean? Which one? One of the 3 Anglo-Afghan wars, like the one in 1919 for their independence, or the Soviet-Afghan war, the one where the US was sending weapons to the guerrilla army that was trying to take out the Soviets, which then fractured into the terrorist groups we know today. And even though some of those groups are allied, like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, the reason something would break into different groups is because there'd be disagreements, and so these groups would fight each other. That's a civil war. Americans should understand what that is. They had one over ending slavery, and also with pointing out how there are different groups in Afghanistan that are fighting each other would help people understand the attack at the airport where all those people were killed by ISIS-K. That some of these groups work together and some of these groups are against each other. But regardless of which group it is, I would imagine it was a lot easier to recruit new members when you had a foreign military occupying your country. I could see it being very easy to convince people to join your team to kick the foreigners out. So I can understand why groups like the Taliban would grow. So I can understand how the Taliban gained control while the troops were still there, especially when you release 5,000 Taliban members. I really wish people would stop giving Trump credit. And in regards to the Afghan army, hearing Americans say, oh, they didn't want to fight for their country, all I hear is, oh, they don't want to fight on behalf of us against groups that we funded decades ago. Oh, and the implication when it comes to the Afghan army is, did people want them to do what the greatest military in the world, the military with the biggest budget that is larger than the next 10 countries combined, you wanted the Afghan army to do what the most highly funded, we're #1 military in the world couldn't do in 20 years. But that's if we're still operating under the illusion that that's what they were there to do, that they were there to bring peace to Afghanistan. Because I don't know how ordering troops to ignore the sexual assault of children is gonna do that. And like, the troops don't have enough things to ruin their mental health. And I don't know how drone strikes that kill innocent people, which then get called collateral damage, is gonna bring peace. And we'll table how much money that all would have cost. So I don't know how drone strikes that take out weddings will bring you peace. I don't know how Australian soldiers executing unarmed people at close range is going to bring you peace. And just 2 dots that I want to connect, just in case nobody else out there does. The fact that that shit happened, that an unarmed Afghan person was executed in a field, but they had 5,000 Taliban members as prisoners just to be released at the last minute. So when you're capturing the dangerous people and executing unarmed people, your excuse about trying to bring peace kind of falls apart, and you're only left with, you're there solely for companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon and Boeing to keep getting that money. So when your presence somewhere ends up amounting to really just war crimes and profiteering of quote-unquote defense contractors, leaving is the right thing to do. Because the longer a foreign military occupies Afghanistan, the more harm that will do to Afghanistan. Because if the mission really was to bring peace, then a big sign that it was a huge failure was how many people had to flee because they feared for their life. Many people that helped the occupying force. And now I believe not many people actually want to leave their home. Many people have a connection to where they're from, especially such a beautiful country like Afghanistan with so much history. So if the mission was to bring peace, we can say that was an absolute failure, which never really was the actual mission, but the real mission seemed to be a success. When you have a look at the defense budget for the United States,
the goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war.
The military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
You know, they don't sell a lot of bombs when we're not dropping bombs on people. You know that, right? It's called the military-industrial complex.
thank you so much for watching. Please like and share this video, not just to help out the channel, but because I would love to hear some opinions that actually matter. I would really like to get some people from Afghanistan in this comment section.
من هر کجایی که باشم توی جان فضای دیارم و من هر کجایی که باشم توی جان فضای دیارم وطن عشق تو افتخارم وطن در هر جان سارم
وطن قلب من هستی من بود رگ رگم پر ز خونم
وطن قلب من هستی من بود رگ رگم پر ز خونم ز تو همچو گل بشکفد اگر در خزان یا بهار ز تو همچو گل بشکفد
اگر در خزان یا بهارم
وطن عشق تو افتخارم وطن در هر جان سارم وطن عشق تو افتخارم وطن در هر جان سارم وطن عشق تو